precious image of me and joy, for accomplishing the highest aim. Our word is old and dear. Whenever I am in the company of others, I will regard myself as the lowest among all, and from the depths of my heart cherish others as supreme. In my very action, I'll watch my mind, and the moment destructive emotions arise, I'll confront them strongly and avoid them, since they will hurt both me and others. Whenever I see ill-natured beings, or those overwhelmed by heavy misdeeds or suffering, I will cherish them as something rare, as though I found a priceless treasure. Whenever someone out of envy does me wrong by attacking or belittling me, I will take the defeat upon myself and give the victory to others. Even when someone I have helped, or in whom I have placed great hopes, mistreats me very unjustly, I will view that person as a true spiritual teacher. In brief, directly or indirectly, I will offer help and happiness to all my mothers, and secretly take upon myself all their suffer. I learn to keep all these practices untainted by thoughts of eight worldly concerns. May I recognize all things as like illusions, and without attachment gain freedom from bondage. So then we'll continue with the root text itself and try to cover the 8th verse, because tomorrow we have only sessions until 10. After that there will be photo sessions and so forth. Tomorrow we have sessions until 10 in the morning. After that it's photo sessions and such. So then the 8th verse, it reads, I will learn to keep all these practices untainted by thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns. May I recognize all things as illusions, as like illusions, and without attachment gain freedom from bondage. So herein, the root text itself mainly focuses on what we call the wisdom aspect of the path, or the wisdom, cultivation of wisdom in the continuum of a practitioner. And now, when we talk about the 8 worldly concerns, we will kind of go on to discuss it in detail later. But the main topic that we need to focus on while we try to understand the meaning of the 8th verse is the wisdom of emptiness. And when we talk about bondage, as it is mentioned here in the text, then it is the bondage of being born in samsara, out of being born in samsara without any sort of freedom, because we are slaves to our afflictions. And then as a result of that bondage, the way that we relate to things or places and people are marked by what we call the 8 worldly concerns. And then, this wisdom of emptiness, is described in the nature of recognizing that all phenomena are like illusions, so you do not develop a sense of attachment to it. And not only attachment, but we begin to have like conceptual thoughts about phenomena and people. So freedom from both attachment and conception is what we mean by gaining this wisdom of emptiness. So then,
sorry, can you make it maybe just this one speaking?
Better? Yes. Okay. So then, when we're talking about the 8th verse, then if we try to get at the meaning of the 8th verse, then first we need to know what do we mean by the 8 worldly concerns, and what is the danger of being motivated by what we call the 8 worldly concerns. Not only the kind of worldly activities that we take part in can be motivated by the 8 worldly concerns, but also all these practices that were mentioned up until the 7th verse could also be motivated by these 8 worldly concerns. And then your practice is not a genuine practice anymore. And it is explained that if you are motivated by the 8 worldly concerns when you try to cultivate your practice, then your practice becomes defiled, in the sense that if you have an object that you hold precious and that you hold dear to you, and then if it begins to gather dust and it begins to lose its shine and so forth, then it's similarly the 8 worldly concerns begin to defile the purity of our practice. So then how do we make sure that our practice is free from the clutches of these 8 worldly concerns? Then the only way is to develop what we call the wisdom of emptiness. And the wisdom of emptiness applies to combat the 8 worldly concerns, in the sense that when we look at the root cause of the 8 worldly concerns arising in us regarding our practice, then it's because the 8 worldly concerns mainly arise from our conceptual level of thinking. And we impose conceptual elaborations onto the objects that we see. We impose conceptual superimpositions, so to say, onto the objects, onto the objects that we perceive, apprehend, and so forth. So due to this conceptual way of thinking, then the 8 worldly concerns motivates us in our practice. So realizing the illusory nature of the way that the 8 worldly concerns make us relate and interact with phenomena, with people, and so forth, then we can get at making sure that our practice is a genuine one, and that is not one defiled by the 8 worldly concerns. And the eight worldly concerns, in short, are the senses of gain and loss that we have, this sense of like pleasure and pain that we have, this sense of praise and blame, and also like the sense of like fame or infamy, fame or dishonor that we have regarding our activities or regarding our motivations. So these are the eight worldly concerns: gain, loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and dishonor, or fame or infamy. So then, when we look at the way that the way that the eight worldly concerns affect us, then when we look at the first particular of the eight worldly concerns, it's this sense of gain and loss that we have. And then when we look at the concern of gain, then it's very funny in the way that when we ourselves gain something, then we have a sense of like happiness, and then people who we hold close and near to us gain something, then we have a sense of happiness or satisfaction. But the same thing when people that we do not like or we consider enemies or so on and so forth gain something, then we do not have the same sense of satisfaction or happiness at all. And likewise, when the sense of loss that when we ourselves and those we hold near or close or dear to us lose something, then we have a sense of like regret, sense of like sadness. But when like someone we do not like loses something of importance to them, then we sometimes like take joy in the fact that serves him right. So similarly, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and infamy. So we create like two divisions, wherein like at one side we take great joy, on the other side we do not take the same joy. At one side we feel sad, at the other side we feel joy. So these are the way that the eight worldly concerns affect the interactions that we have. So then it becomes very important as a practitioner that whatever activity that we engage in, say doing a recitation or praying or abiding by a code of conduct, or even like the small act of giving something to someone, all of this should not be tainted by the defilement of the eight worldly concerns. We should learn to go beyond the eight worldly concerns and never make our practice defiled by these sort of like motivations or concerns. And then, as we begin to begin to purify our practice in this manner, and then we should also learn to look at all phenomena, and that the reason that we tend to relate with phenomena in the manner in the way that the eight worldly concern dictates us is because we have this ingrained need to grasp at the reality of the self and others, wherein we hold the self and phenomena as truly established from their side. And we also discussed about this, how emptiness comes into play here, wherein we say that the wisdom of emptiness teaches us that things or phenomena are not truly established or objectively from their own side, but that it exists just as a designated term or an imputed term from the conceptual level of thinking from our side. And then we should not go to the extreme of saying that nothing exists then, because the text makes the point that we should, as it makes the important point that may I recognize all things as like illusions, not illusions itself. So this is the kind of fine point wherein the reason or the concept of interdependence comes into play, wherein it says we should not say that nothing exists. It exists just as a term, but then when you go on to find it, it does not exist just as we conceptually think it does. So this is the fine line and the reasoning behind the wisdom of emptiness. So then, when we talk about such levels of subtle emptiness or subtle wisdom of emptiness, then we need to try to think about first at the gross level how we could apply the concept of emptiness to kind of overcome our sense of attachment to things. For example, when something of value breaks, or when something of value to us breaks or is damaged, then immediately we have a sense of like loss. This is because we have a grasping not only at the self and phenomena, but at a very gross level. Because of this grasping of self and phenomena, we have a grasping also at a misguided grasping at the permanence of things. We feel like it is natural that this thing, if it falls down, it's naturally going to break. But then we have a sense of attachment because of the attachment that we have towards this, we almost feel like this is a stable, permanent thing that should never break. This is the kind of reaction we have because of the attachment. So the concept of emptiness, when you apply it at a gross level, then we can know that the nature of all phenomena itself is impermanent. And we can try to first let go of this grasping at the permanence of things, this misguided conception of things as being permanent that we have in our heads. Not even permanent, but we feel like this is something solid, stable, which will last for a long time, wherein like in any small instance of accident, it could naturally disintegrate and break apart. And then also trying to think about the way that this grasping at permanence that we have at the level of our lifespans. We feel like we're going to live for a long time, and we feel like we never really do think about the fact that ultimately we die. we never really have a understanding of this at a deep level. But this is because we have, at a very gross level, a grasping at the permanence of things. So all of this like misguided conception of material things being something solid, stable, that's unbreakable, or like looking at it as something permanent, is like an illusion that we have created for ourselves. And when that illusion begins to shatter, then we begin to suffer. So this is the way in which we can try to first think at a gross level, to try to apply the concept of emptiness into our lives. So then, as most of us are adults by now, then we have already lived a substantial part of our lives. And now what's left of it, maybe it's time to make the best use of it, best use out of it. And if we spend the rest of the time that we have with the same kind of doubt, same kind of suspicion, same kind of like thinking that doesn't serve any purpose for us or for others, then it's a waste of time. So we really need to let go of these kind of doubts, these kind of suspicions, this kind of suffocated way of thinking about the world and ourselves, and try to become more open and more free in the time that we have now. So then, if we are able to make the best of our time, what is left, or what time we have left, then if we try to cultivate our practice, if we try to engage in virtuous acts, then of course it goes without saying that it helps for you to take birth, to take birth in a favorable condition in your next life. But also, when we think about the way, if you cannot think that far ahead, or cannot accept such concepts, then when at the moment of death, if you are able to make the best use of your time, then you do not really have any regrets at that point. Whereas, if you kind of engage in the same non-virtuous acts and you do not try to subdue the afflictions in your mind and keep engaging mindlessly in the same old activities, creating disturbances for yourself and for others, at the moment of death, then the only thing that you are left with is regret, because you cannot take anything that you have built or achieved into the next life, or you cannot take anything that you have built or achieved. At the point of death, you have to leave everything behind. So it's up to us to make the choice now, that at the moment of death, would you want to be faced with a sense of regret, or would you want to go without any sense of regret? So then, this is a way that we can try to think about outer phenomena and things in general. But now we also need to apply the same kind of introspection and contemplation about our own self, and to look at oneself, and then to see that our existence and our sustenance as such, as a human being, really do depend on a lot of factors, and we really do depend on other factors and other people and so forth. Otherwise, if a person has this idea or conception in his head that I did everything on my own and I can exist on my own, then he or she begins to develop a sense of like arrogance and conceit about oneself. So, but in reality, when you check objectively, then our existence as a human being, our sustenance as a human being, or even as like a personal, even as one person, if we really think about it, really have to depend on others and other people's labor and other factors. So this is a fact, and we should try to recognize this fact in order to subdue a sense of arrogance arising in us. Because the opposite is very dangerous. This feeling of that I am independent, I can do everything on my own, I build everything on my own, I am my own person. And then you develop a sense of arrogance about yourself, wherein you disregard the fact that a lot of people contributed to what you have achieved. And a lot of factors came together to make possible what you have achieved. So then, whether we are rich, whether we are poor, or whether we are a billionaire, then it doesn't make sense to think that we are like a self-sustaining entity in all its right, because the poor people, as the poor people do depend on the generosity of others to kind of see the day through, then rich people also, and billionaires, even if you take the case, really do depend on the service of others. For example, they need a secretary, they need like a security and so forth. So if you are indeed such a self-sustaining entity, then you do not need all that. So it serves to make the point that everything exists in an interdependent relation. So this is a very effective way of looking at how we can try to adopt the wisdom of emptiness in our practice. We try to relate it to ourselves also from time to time, not only about the nature of phenomena, nature of reality, something on the outset, but try to look at your own existence sometimes. For example, as we gather here for the duration of these teachings, then there is no place for us to say that we are a self-sustaining entity personally, because the food we depend on some other people, and the hall in which this gathering is taking place is made possible by the labor of other people, so on and so forth. So if you think about that, then all like small activities that we think that we are taking part in as a self-sustaining entity is misguided, and it doesn't make sense. So then all of this, in the end, is to kind of subdue our afflictions, such as arrogance arising in us, this wisdom of emptiness, as we call it. So it's very important not to just leave it at that as a teaching, to always have a sense of analysis, a sense of reasoning within yourself when you like try to think about these things and try to relate it to your experience. And this is why in the Buddhist tradition, 3 steps are mentioned in order to kind of achieve the path that you want to walk on. And the 3 steps are first listening to the Dharma, then contemplating on the Dharma, and then meditating on the Dharma. And why do we talk about these 3? Why are the 3 steps necessary? Because it gives you the opportunity to kind of think about the teachings through your own analysis, through your own reasonings. So this is what it means to contemplate and to listen to the Dharma. So then there's the danger, of course, when we're talking about emptiness, then some people get the idea that if we begin to understand emptiness, then nothing exists at all. That nothing exists at all. That we developed such a nihilistic point of view. But then, judging by the kind of reaction that you have right now, and from the fact that I heard that many of you attended courses in Tushita, I think you have a general understanding about what emptiness means, because there aren't many questions arising at this point. But we should also know that when we're talking about emptiness, we do not say that nothing exists. We say that nothing exists as it appears to us, or as we conceive them to be. And when we say nothing exists as they appear to us, or nothing exists as we conceive them to be, then we mean that things or phenomena are not established, are not truly established from their own side. And then how does it exist then? Then it exists in an interdependent relation with many causes and conditions and factors coming together. So then generally when we talk about emptiness, then even in the Buddhist tradition there are various interpretations and there are various assertions regarding what emptiness really means. And there is the Madhyamika, or the middle way point of view. And then there are whole tenet systems that argue against this point of view. So even among the Buddhist tradition, there are systems of philosophy who have their own understanding and interpretation of emptiness. So maybe it's a hard concept to immediately understand or wrap our heads around. But to give you a general idea, this is what it means, that when we're talking about emptiness, things are not truly established objectively from their own side. And then how does it exist? It only exists, things exist in interdependent relation upon causes and conditions and factors coming together, and then it exists only as designations or only as terms that the conceptual mind begins to impute onto the object. Yes. So any questions? So then, if there are no questions, then I would like to request you all to kind of contemplate on the text from time to time. Try to read the commentaries from time to time and really use your own intelligence and your own reasoning when you are contemplating on the text.
다리거나 이게 남았으면 제가 이게 남았으면 되가려면 나센 뉴센 못하시는
So then, if there are no questions, then as we were discussing about the three doors and the non-virtuous act that springs from each of these three particular doors, then we covered already the non-virtuous actions from the body and speech. Now we will try to discuss the non-virtuous act of the mind or thought, as we say. And now when we're talking about the non-virtuous actions of the body, speech and mind, then if we are able to kind of cultivate our practice, then the very three doors becomes the source of virtuous actions too. And when we're talking about the non-virtuous actions of the mind, then there are three. The first one is harmful intent, and the second one is coveting other people's belonging, and the third one is developing wrong views.
Could you repeat it, please?
Yes, harmful intent.
Harmful.
Yes, and the second one is coveting, wanting other people's things. You want other people's things for yourself. Yes, and then the third is developing wrong views.
근데 이제 다 나는 나생을 더 되게 전에 지금 만나고 지 지도부질로 들으냐 이거 사실 카투카데 짬마들이 제라발로 딱 봤어 그러는데 나생을 비즈니스 나 sembar나고 싶을래요. 생고는 컨센트 이야기. 가시한 지 캔템버 저지는 카투카들을 위한 제라 시라샤입니다. 그래서 나생을 sembar이 배 칼라오다. 이모지게 거 봐. 가려다가 잡았어.
Nusimara.
나생.
Napsimna. So then when we're talking about harmful intent, then it's the kind of like what we call, I forget the word in English, the kind of resentment that we hold within ourselves. To give you a gross example, the kind of resentment that you hold in yourself is some other people like hurt you, and then this resentment builds up and it turns into a harmful intention, wherein like you want to say, okay, wait until one day and I will retaliate in a manner that serves this person right. So this is the gross example of what we call harmful intent.
So also ill will.
Yes, of course. And the kulung nyamba chawai de. So yes, ill will too. So have any of you had such thoughts?
Like for example,
Yeah, okay, like for example, let's hear it. So since we are all spiritual friends, we need to be forthright and honest now.
Oh, we need to share.
Yes.
I think it's all, everything that I can, think of when I have negative emotions or negative attitude towards someone who I think is not doing right or hurt me, I'm very aware of that. I know that everything is in my mind, and of course it will never come to an action, because I will not do something about it. It will not be an action. But in my brain, of course, many times, I think, I can say to myself, even with satisfaction, okay, this bad neighbor, one day, and his karma will, you can just imagine what will happen to him. Not by me, but, something will happen to me. Be very happy about it, and then I catch myself. Yeah, but I do think these thoughts.
Yes. samla nyemba de to khorgeres ane di meso la le mada nesra semna la ni chigora nesem ki kulung ra ta samla nyemba to pe bom khorgeres pena chashin na la chomba chi nas chomba ya boshi ra me nasra ani meso da ke di male nesra ta so la lot seme ro chi de ra nas de nesem di shart de zamba lot seme chi to samla khande to khorge tu la nasra kola nima chik le junde ki takda soyir le junde ki shagi mari la edo sam khore jo go tende sam khore dus anyone else
For many, many years, I had the vision that I would go and hurt in all possible ways my father who left us and really hurt my mother and my family. And when this dissolved, it was an amazing freedom for me when this desire for revenge dissolved.
Can I ask you how?
How it dissolved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good question.
Layers and layers and layers of injecting love, not in him or thinking of him, but in life in general, in people, in believing in other father figures, and also thanking him for leaving in the end, because I never had a father that said no, or that abused me, or that locked me in anything. So I was very free thanks to that. So in the end, I was very grateful for him to give me, to offer me vastness and freedom.
anyone else
나랑 뭐 이제 되게 와 정신 그다음에 자나 싶다 그건 무슨 일이 저도 시에 돼 아니 이거 안정되는 저 되다 거기도 어떻게 신는 때문에 되는 거 미지라 그거 선물 먹고 잖아 코디 있었대 코디가 뭐서 이미지 코 두어 참아 태양 참아 지니 야빠잖아 태양이 차는다 그래도 근데 나 생이는데 하면 돼 근데 뒤에 나라서 개변이 치들을 된 거야 코디로 조지 버시는
so then when we think about the kind of situation that the Tibetans find themselves in then as a young person then I'm not sure if it constitutes what we call harmful intent or ill will as the text describe it but then when we were young then we used to think that if the Chinese leader one day wakes up and forgets everything that he has done everything until now, and that only positive things come into his mind, and that he does only positive things, how wonderful it would be. So this kind of what you call wishful thinking used to arise in us when we were young. So then moving on, the second non-virtuous action of the mind is to covet other people's belonging and to this kind of thought that you want other people's things for yourself out of a sense of attachment. And this is explained in this manner wherein when this thought arises in you, then most of the time it impels you to engage in employing any means necessary to get what you covet now. So this is the danger of this attitude or this non-virtuous action of the mind called covetousness. Covetousness. Covertness. No, not jealousy exactly. Let's say we had an interaction yesterday when you said you like the bag I was carrying. Right? Now, I'm not saying this is wanting something for yourself immediately, but an example. said you liked the bag. You
Yeah.
thought, yes?
Actually, I didn't want it to be for
No,
myself.
no. But
That's why.
it could be the case that in that instance you feel like, oh, how wonderful it would be if I had this bag for myself. Yes? So this is the kind of attitude we are talking about.
Why is it bad?
Hmm?
Why is it bad? It doesn't mean that I don't want you to have it. I want to have it too.
Because
Why
it
is
does
it
not.
a bad thing?
What?
Why is it a negative?
Isn't it that you're then thinking of taking it?
Yes.
I didn't want it.
No, it's just an example. It's an example.
I want you to
I'm not
have it.
talking about that particular interaction we had.
I'm continuing the example.
Hmm.
Why is it a bad thing to want something that someone else has?
Because in your mind you're then planning of taking it.
No.
No, not you.
Not you.
I'm not talking about me, I'm talking generally. You can want something that someone has.
Yeah, but this word implies that it's developing to you wanting to take it.
What do we mean by the word coveting something?
Oh, coveting. Okay. I understand. Okay.
Yes?
Mhm.
You had this intention to take something that does not belong to you.
Yeah, but I want to say something about it because there is something which is not material,
Hmm.
like someone is very wise, like someone is very educated,
Yes.
and you want to be like that.
Yes.
You want to have it too.
Hmm.
That would be an aspiration though, would it not? That would be more of an aspiration, I think. You would aspire to be as intelligent as them, but you can't take their intelligence.
Yeah.
Unless you
Yeah.
curse them.
But the tendency of
what they do is
wanting
What
something
드라마틱
else.
하더라.
But I think the aspiration would be a positive quality, aspiring to recognizing they have a positive quality and aspiring to have that within yourself.
So you say that material things are
If you are planning, have the thought process of taking them from someone else without them giving them to you.
But I guess you
나
can also
납심래
aspire to have
중마고 지불래 샤에.
when someone has
But
something
that-
else, you just aspire on
But then you're not going to take it from them
No.
if you're aspiring.
I
Are you?
don't, yeah, it's like, yeah, I understand it, but I think that wanting something and want anybody else to have it too, you know, it's not complete.
I think
Yeah,
that
that's
is not
fine.
meant.
That is not
Okay.
what we
Yeah,
are
that's
talking
fine.
about.
Yeah, well,
That's fine. That is good.
Okay, let Gishma continue. She has an example. Maybe this will settle the point.
अरे जरा गाँव से चला जो गो समझे ठीक मार के दो क्या मारा पहला गाँव यूज गो सन ट्रम नट दी जो ना शुद्धी मारा सो गो पिछता है वो वाला इन्हें यार तंग पे ना ना तिंडे रो चेंबे ये कि गोया चले तेरे यार न्यू मोटा तो जैसे मोमच दे वाला पहला गाँव से ओके दा तंग जे नुबची ये यानी पोंपरोशी ना ये जेकब दे यापोस क्या तो चंबो से शुभुस जेकब सामे ये जेकब दे याशी सो ना को नुबत दिया रा नसेरा तदी दिस जोला नि मिले माजो ओ जिंगो द सिक्स बोला मोमच लिंदा तेरे रो चिपे चिपे शादा यानी सोसोले गोया चारा कोंच मुझे ना तदी ये नमसा ले था कुछ राई मारा कल ती राया ला मुसाया ला तो सोसो कले जो ना ची समझला पेना ना तो फिर रो ने जी समुद्र रो ऐसा को रो क्लिक्स ले दूरा ते चना दवाला ची ने था जगह ले उन्हें गल ची मिले खादू ना तो मोमच सेनस मुझे साने चला जोरा ने इदी गल ती चला सोसो लो ने गोया की ती राया की ची चना बिजनेस ची ची को ले इबा मोमच साइला मोसे तिलते
So then, to give you a small example, to clear your point, just because you want a pen, let's say this pen, doesn't mean that you covet this pen. Because you can go to the market and buy it with your own money. Now, when we are talking about coveting, it belongs to someone else. And then you want it for yourself. And then this kind of wanting the thing for yourself is informed by a motivation of jealousy and greed. That is what we mean by coveting something for yourself that does not belong to you. And then this is the danger now, the kind of afflictions that arise in us because we want something for ourselves. And then it's being motivated by jealousy and greed and so forth. Let's say that that now we can try to broaden the example in the case of nations. let's say there is a leader of a particular nation, and then he says that he wants his country to be the best, his country to be the number one, so to say. And then in order to get that kind of recognition, then he begins to, what you call, invade where necessary, take what's
Tell me about it.
yes, right? And then a lot of other things happens. This all comes from the same what you call, non-virtuous action of the mind. And then, for example, in Tibet, in order to get to make a big purchase, the traditional Tibetan people do not have a lot of money. So then, in order to make a big purchase, then they have to kind of engage in looking for these expensive mushrooms that they find in the grasslands, or to look for what we call Yarza Gumbu, which I think is translated as cordyceps.
Oh, cordyceps.
Yes, so the Tibetans look for those, and then in order to make that big purchase, they have to do all this, and it kind of causes imbalance in the ecosystem and all. So all of this come from the same kind of intention of coveting something that does not belong to you.
That question.
Now it's clear?
Yeah, it was clear before. I just wanted to.
다이를 라 다만 쓰듯이 근데 법무도 이제 진짜로 이제 같이 아주 다 공춘부터 깼다. 담보들을 찾아 땅한테 고미 셔바지 땅한테 이제 고고도 되는. 다디라야라 그 탑시 땅에서 상무 마무리 무슨 데서 마무리 레오라. 라. 이 디바 마무리 스타일다. 지라는 거 잘라 고아 좀 이유에 된데 깨물어. 데를 때문에 남자 남자 지금 칠레 개버기 칼로. 근데 마무리 많다는 쇼라 그 디바라 생긴 스타일.
So another example to kind of settle the point now, we can take the example of jewelry that a woman wears, and then if some other women sees this jewelry, then immediately there's a sense of attachment, and then the thought develops that I want that jewelry, that same piece for myself. Going to the market and buying it is is a different case, but then you feel if it's like a rare piece of jewelry, then the woman who becomes attached to this rare piece of jewelry then begins to develop a sense of greed about the jewelry, and then she might engage in employing means that are not ethical in getting that thing for herself. So this is the danger of what we call coveting. So then, moving on, then the third non-virtuous action of the mind is to develop wrong views. So now, from a Buddhist perspective, when we say that you have developed wrong views, then wrong views are explained in the manner of not accepting the law of causality or karma itself, or not accepting rebirth or next life and so forth. So this is the kind of traditional way of explaining or developing wrong views. But now in this multicultural gathering from different background, it's not really applicable, and it doesn't make sense to say that if you do not accept karma or rebirth, then you have developed wrong views. So from a finer perspective, even from the Buddhist perspective, wrong view could simply meant to be understood those who deny reality. So if you begin to deny reality, then you have developed wrong views.
Can I ask something about it? I mean, I don't believe there is one reality, to be honest. I think we all see the world in a different view. Obviously, people with different values, and from, let's say, during a war, every side thinks they're the good guys, and the other side is the bad. So, what is reality really? How can we understand what is right and what is No.
Of course. 다 나저기 뎀바 뭐 보기 니즈 뭐기 니즈라. 아니 캠링에 질라 나저기 따따와 봐. 나나 샤나 디게 레송라. 근데 델라데서 뭐 아니 뭐기 니즈 뭐베 니즈래 줘라. 뭐베 니루래 답에 유다 유진라라 주지 통고도스. 가자는 미치기 용화되다 미치기 아니 뭐베 니루 또나디 백해봐도 그럴 거지. 제자도 뭐베 니루라나 타치도 찍라셔야 요즘 문제 치기면서. 유다 유진라 니 쇼라래 와지 문제 치기. 제자인데 뭐베 니루라나 찍란 찍셔야
이거 내일은 지치리 사sam들. 이거 내일 돈이 들어 말아.
You're not talking about like reality of the reality of world being like emptiness of intrinsic existence and such.
No, but I guess it is in a way related to it.
So you are talking more in the conventional sense of the word.
Yes.
일단 아주 근접기 나왔다나 아니 뭐 베넬로리 지용금이 나왔어.
근데 가서 요라이라. 지금 미치기를 따라지게 하고 통화지 두자 통화지를. 얘네 다 나가서 미참만이란 좀 아주 될지 마시시니 되고 이러지라. 다들에 약고도 두자들에 한디 남도 가는 마음으로 그때 가서 따통만. 아무튼 좀 봐나 아주 되게 쉬어진 거 이러지. 말하자면 되게 높아르시라.
So of course, because of the subjective consciousness that each person have, then the reaction and the way that conceptual thought begins to kind of impose goodness or badness onto the object. This is of course different than the kind of reality that we are talking about. When we talk about conventional reality too, then the fact, of course, the reaction to the teaching that's being given here is different. But we cannot go on to deny the fact that the teaching was not taking place in the first place, because we call it teaching in the conventional, and then we are engaging in this act of listening to the teaching. So it's about that kind of reality that we are talking about, not necessarily the subjective consciousness reacting to an object. Of course, that varies from person to person.
정말 가서 좀